So this is my first guide, my first build guide. It's for the Human Sentinel, one of my favorite characters, hands down. Probably the one I use the most now, actually. I overuse it. It's a big crutch for me. You're looking at my favorite moment. That's a kill streak. I just edited that into the beginning of the video because I love it. It's my favorite moment playing with the Human Sentinel. It happened really early in my experience. It was a kill streak I got off of a biotic explosion. This is the only character I can actually pull that off with, although I'll be honest, I've only pulled it off a couple of times. That was one of them. The other one wasn't recorded, unfortunately, but it's fun. So anyway, I want to talk basically about the build just a tiny bit. I describe it in a thread on BSN, or at least I will by the time this goes up. But I want to cover a couple of the basics of it fairly quickly, just to establish the key points of it. I don't want to discuss it at length because I think that'll already be covered. And I want to get into the basic tactics of using the character. If you're looking to make a transition to gold, and you're looking to make a transition to platinum, and you're looking for a character that gives you a really nice balance of offense and defense, and provides you the ability to keep up with other players in the game, be offensively productive, and still give you excellent all-around survivability skills, a biotic explosion build for the Human Sentinel is a great choice. And the basic design of the build is to take the area of effect on throw, not the recharge bonuses on throw, but to beef it up because it does give you versatility to have a good strong throw. So don't worry about the recharge time on throw. Take the damage force bonus that you get with it, make sure you take it to rank 6, and take the area of effect. That'll make it easier to target enemies for explosions. This, by the way, is the classic moment that I die in any given, the one-on-one with a Marauder, that elbow of doom. But it was right at the end of the wave. No biggie. And I should get back to the tactics as quickly as possible. So recharge time on warp. Don't worry about damage on warp. You're not using warp for direct offense damage. You're using it to debuff armored enemies and set up biotic explosions. And on very rare occasions to stagger and set up biotic explosions. That's a great way to use throw that I just used there, by the way. And I should have been talking about the technique by then. I'm a little slow down. I'll look at this as a dress rehearsal and I'll probably re-record it after. But the concept is to have the ability to set off the biotic explosions as quickly as possible and as powerfully as possible, so you take all the damage bonuses on biotic explosions. And what you'll see is that a brute on gold with warp ammo 3, or something basic like that, probably incendiary would work as well. 2 biotic explosions would kill a brute on gold, which is a pretty good pace. In fact, brutes die very quickly to the Human Sentinel. It's a very consistent trick. The 2 biotic explosion one will work quite well. The basic tactics and strategy for using a 2-power biotic explosion setup like this off of your right and left bumpers on Xbox or whatever you have them set to on PlayStation or PC is that most of the time you're going to be using throw. And you can't really tell from this video which one I'm using. Warp and throw look very, very similar. So it's very difficult to tell whether I'm using warp or whether I'm using throw. The obvious cue is going to be how long the refresh takes. When I'm using throw, I'm getting a really fast refresh, and I'm able to take out mooks quite quickly. Now, I don't have a power amp on, so I'm not taking them out with one hit or anything like that. Although that can actually, weaker mooks can definitely be one-shot killed with this build using warp ammo and, warp ammo would imply not one-shot kill, but you can definitely do it with a power amp, but only against the weaker ones. And it's a very effective basic mook tool. Even if they have shields up, if you're desperate at the last second, it'll stagger them long enough for you to get some distance. If you do it better than I did against that Marauder. I think I actually used warp on that Marauder, which is part of my problem. So you'll see me using that a lot right now. And the ideal weapon for this build is certainly the Acolyte. And if you have it, even at level 1, and get the hang of using it as a charged weapon, it will make this particular kit, and frankly a lot of biotic kits, really shine. But this one definitely benefits the most from the Acolyte as a weapon. Using the Acolyte to debuff with warp and set up a biotic explosion, which you can immediately follow up with throw, is basically the bread and butter damage that this character does. Even just the Acolyte plus the warp ammo and throw alone will take care of most mooks quite effectively. Even a Marauder, if you happen to have power amps on it as well, can, depending on what happens, be killed by a single combination of Acolyte and throw. Usually that's going to require getting thrown a very long distance into an object, but it can be done. In fact, I almost did it right there, without the benefit of a power amp. I'm using a cyclonic mod. That might be fairly obvious. And that's one of the advantages of this build defensively, is that you can throw a cyclonic on this character, which is a base 500 health, 500 shield human character, but that cyclonic is actually having considerably more effect than it might at first appear. because the Cyclonic mod actually benefits from the DR, essentially. It's doubling the shields, but because you're combining that with DR, you're actually getting considerably more effect out of it. There are several occasions you'll see during the video where I'm getting shot by a Marauder at close range, and he doesn't even shield gate it. And it's because the Cyclonic and the DR in combination gives you a tremendous amount of tankiness. And the fact that you still have a quick human dodge that lets you roll out of the way gives this character a great bit of all-around offense. One thing I want to mention very clearly is two bad habits I have with this build. You might have detected them already if you're an expert player. I will point them out so that hopefully I can warn other players who are trying this out, using this build and my technique, from accidentally recreating my bad habits and patterns. The first thing, right there, I should have used tech armor. I should use tech armor all the time, and I don't. I need to learn to use it. Right there, should have used tech armor again. Bad habit. Should be using tech armor. Bad Jeremiah, use tech armor all the time. Tech armor all the things. And I'm not doing that. That's a bad habit, and I need to break that with this character. So when things are swarming you, don't be afraid to use tech armor. It's an excellent close combat power, and I underuse it terribly. I have tech armor spec'd for biotic offense and recharge speed, or a reduction in the recharge penalty, which is what makes this build work. But it is still very functionally useful in a close combat, get out of jail recharge, or something. You need to stagger something standing next to you. When you have the crowds of enemies and you can pull it off, the biotic explosion is really effective. It's been said that it often won't quite measure up to warp as a debuff with a very powerful weapon that is effectively used, and I'm very certain that's true. But it is still an incredibly effective, perfectly viable way of doing lots of damage. One of the things that I found with this particular build, I first learned how to do this with an Avenger for Dragon Age's tournament, because we had to stick with common characters and common weapons. And I had never really used a Human Sentinel or an Avenger before, and I found it remarkably easy to be very effective using these biotic explosions with the damage bonuses of the two powers in combination. These biotic explosions can be really devastating for just about everyone in the game. You reinforce them properly with the right gear and equipment, and it's practically easy mode. You're not watching like any kind of super expert player, which is probably kind of obvious, but I am being really effective. I'm doing a lot of damage. When I'm using these biotic explosions against the Banshee, it's clearing out the barriers a lot. Oh, the other bad habit that I have, which you may have also just noticed, I should be switching to the Hurricane, which I also have equipped when I'm fighting a Banshee. I should, as soon as the shields are gone, I should stop using the Acolyte and start using the Hurricane. I whipped that missile out, by the way, in case the person I revived were to get sync killed, which he didn't. He wasn't grabbed, but just in case the Banshee got cute and tried to sync kill him, I wanted to grab the missile out just to be ready, which is why I did that. And then promptly put it away. That wasn't an accidental, I went for an ops pack, pulled out a missile by mistake moment. His build is really effective against all different kinds of enemies, and that's probably my favorite thing about it. If I've got an armored enemy charging at me, if I've got a brute, I just start whipping off biotic explosions. That brute is not much to deal with. Acolyte to apply warp ammo for the damage debuff and the improvement on your biotic damage. Follow it up with warp, which also debuffs and sets off the biotic explosion. Throw sets off the biotic explosion. Now the brute has a little more than half its health, and I'm not entirely sure why that is, because the second one always kills it. I have no idea what that's about, but it always seems to have more than half its health after the first biotic explosion. But then I repeat the process a second time. Maybe some of these bonuses stack in a convenient way. I'm not sure. I'm not a math expert on how the game's background works. But that second biotic explosion utterly destroys the brute. And the beauty of using that technique is that anything standing near it is going to get killed too, unless it has more armor or health than the brute does. So the Ravager standing next to the brute gets caught in the biotic explosion. Well, it's going to die after 2 biotic explosions as well, and so is pretty much everything else in the area. It's a very devastating area effect impact build. You can handle large groups or small groups of small enemies or mooks or anything like that. My cat just came into the room and startled the living crap out of me. Hi, cat. This is a dress rehearsal anyway. Don't feel guilty for interrupting my recording. I'm getting shot. But notice I didn't get shield gate. That's what I was talking about. A simple cyclonic. I'm using a cyclonic 3 in this game, a pistol amp 1, and a warp ammo 3. And that combination is not I'm not using level 4 of anything. The pistol amp 1 is practically a formality. When I say an Acolyte 1 will allow this build to sing, it really will. You don't need the damage from the Acolyte. There's lots of talk of it being crutch. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to show an alternative to something like a Juggernaut for making you jump to gold or platinum. Look at how much I'm getting shot right here, by the way. This is gold. I mean, it's not the hardest difficulty level, but I'm getting shot by a Marauder at close range on gold repeatedly, and I'm not getting shield gated. This is an incredibly defensive build. It's allowing me, and it's crutch. I'm not denying it's crutch. I want to sell the idea that this is a crutch build, because it works so well that I would much rather have newer players using a biotic-based class like this, where you're taking advantage of tech armor and an existing weapon in the game like the Acolyte. And you don't need the Acolyte to make this work. As I said, I started doing this with an Avenger. The Acolyte's the best choice, but it's not the only one. Any weapon you are good with and that you are confident you can apply ammo power to, you will be able to successfully create lots of damage out of it, lots of biotic explosions, lots of enhanced throw effects, because that's why I use the warp ammo, is it makes throw that much deadlier, and I can just start whipping the mooks around, and I don't even have to worry. If they're anywhere near me, they're flying halfway across the map. Any abominations or husks aren't going to be close enough to do any damage to me, if they survive, which they usually won't. And Marauders are thrown for a complete loop by an Acolyte followed up by a throw, because the Acolyte staggers them, and their stagger cooldown does not work against throw. So they get staggered by the Acolyte, and then the throw follows up, and just miles. And a Marauder that's been thrown for miles is ragdolled. He can't even get up and shoot you. If he isn't killed by the impact against something, which again, he often will be, he is essentially rendered helpless for a significant amount of time. So it's really easy to be a helpful team player with this build as well. And that's one of the other things I really want to sell about it, and the Human Sentinel. It's a great team kit. You set up debuffs for your team with Warp. You can apply direct offense really effectively, even on gold. Even with the reduced amount of mooks on gold, throw all by itself is still... I mean, I just killed that guy with it. It's a very effective weapon, and I don't think it gets more powerful than the Human Sentinel. I think the Human Sentinel pretty much transforms throw into the most powerful weapon throw from technical speed. I don't know that anybody else gets all the bonuses on it that the Human Sentinel does. So it's a completely devastating weapon against mooks. Warp is a beautiful debuffer against armored opponents and will turn you into a massive boss killer with biotic explosions. So, I hope this game sort of serves as a good... I'm probably going to stop shortly. I've said the bulk of what I wanted to say about how the kit works, how the build works together, how the mechanics come together to kill enemies really effectively. And I'm sort of hoping to get out of this before I get sync-killed by the Banshee, which I think happens in about 1 minute. Or maybe I'll just let it play out until I get sync-killed by the Banshee so we can all share in my pain. But yeah, a small group of mooks, and I just walk right through them completely there. A husk runs up, I'm not even slightly worried. I could very easily dealt with that group of mooks right there. Just using an Acolyte and throw. I didn't even have to set up a biotic explosion. But as I demonstrated in that little cut just from earlier in the game, if you target Warp right to set up a biotic explosion in the middle of a group of enemies, you can devastate that group, and you can even get a kill streak out of it. One of the tricky bits about that can often be if you don't have the area effect on throw, and if you're a really good player, you're probably better off without it. But I'm not at such a skill level where my accuracy with throw is going to be perfect. There it is. I had meant to be done by this point. But anyway, my accuracy with throw isn't perfect. That area effect makes it easy to hit somebody next to my primary target and ultimately kill them. And since we're now in spectator mode, I'm going to call that a day. You might recognize a couple of the names of players you saw there. They've turned up on BSN and videos from time to time of myself and other players. Anyway, thanks for listening. I might end up recording this, but I end up going with the first cut. I hope this is helpful to people who are just starting with the game, and or just starting to make transition rather to gold and platinum. And if they're looking for a kit that does a really great job of letting them keep up with good players, do lots of damage, and still have an easy time surviving, the Human Sentinel is probably my favorite all-around build for that purpose, at least right now anyway. Thanks for listening, and have a good one, guys.